So yeah, let's move on to step five here. So step five in Dave's plan is saving for college. So we've done the investing, we've been working on that. And so I think it's, kind of similar. We're talking about, we're still talking about putting money away for some future event and some future need that we have. So, college is a little bit different. Now, if you don't have kids, then obviously you can skip over this step and contribute that money into your own future. But if you do have kids and I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old at home, and those are things that are going to be coming into the reality here in the next few years as to what are they going to do in their adult life? What are they going to do for a career path? Are they going to be an entrepreneur like their dad? Or are they going to do, kind of the normal thing? They're going to go to college. What are they going to get into? What are they going to need? Are they going to be getting into a trade? I was talking to a friend yesterday that he's got a son that's in his 30s, early 30s, I think, and he's going to get into the electrical trade and become an electrician now that he's kind of got his bearings and stuff like that. And what do we do to help our children get to that point? 'Cause especially for college, it can be a very big financial burden on families to try to get them into a college, because college expenses continue to go up every single year. I saw some graphs recently talking back to when the Department of Education was created nationally, and that the cost of tuition has just gone up dramatically ever since I think it was in the 1980s. And part of that's due to inflation, obviously. Part of that is due to the popularity of college and, a lot of factors that we won't get into right now, obviously. But at the end of the day, how do we prepare for this? And so the traditional advice is a 529 plan. And much like we've been doing with several of these baby steps, is asking the deeper question. Is this the best place? Are there anything else out there that will do this? And looking at the whole college process, there's a great interview that Matt Love did, I think last fall, with a gentleman. He's actually here in Michigan where I'm at, and he does strategic college planning. And there was a lot of great nuggets that he talked about in there. One of them is the special use of what we've been talking about, and we talk about all the time, is specially designed cash value life insurance as part of, or for some, it's even the best strategy to do completely all as the this is the college savings plan. Because one of the things that we see with college planning is when the child is ready to get into college and they're maybe in their junior year of high school and starting to prep for all that stuff, and they're doing their FAFSAs and they're filling out all the things that need to be done and looking at how much financial aid does this family qualify for. The government has their criteria of what they're going to look at, and it's your assets and it's your income and those types of things. So if you have a portion of your income that is in a cash value life insurance policy, that's essentially off the radar screen of the criteria that they're going to look for. So you can actually still be making the same amount of money, but have your assets positioned in a certain way where you're going to be able to provide more financial aid ability for your child by doing that. And that's one strategy of using a whole life policy for college planning. The other one is what happens if your child doesn't go to college, or like we've already talked about in investing. What happens with investing, we talk about usually with retirement, but the same principle holds true with investing when we're talking about college. What happens if the market bottoms out a year or two, or the year that your child needs to go to college, and you thought you had 100 grand, but now you got 75, and it doesn't meet all the tuition needs? What are you going to do then? So having that backup plan, kind of that volatility buffer, if you will, even for college planning, much like we would think about it for retirement planning, thinking about having the ability to have more flexible capital, more flexible cash, that if my child doesn't want to become a nurse or doesn't want to become a lawyer, where definitely has to go into college, they want to go a different route, I've got capital that there's not going to be extra penalties because they didn't go into the college system. Because that's what 529s have, is much like a retirement plan. If you're using the money prematurely, you're not in retirement, you wanted to get access to it, you get a 10% penalty. 529s are very similar in that fact. If you're not using the money for what it was designed to do, they penalize you for it. Now that loses control, it loses flexibility, it loses value of that money. If you're wanting to, pivot and go a different direction with the money that you've been allocating for college, and just put you in a less efficient position. So doing some of these strategic moves around the college planning, I've never heard Dave talk about this. You have to usually go to alternative sources who are thinking more holistically, more outside the box, looking at a lot more moving pieces, and how do other things than just rate of return solve a problem more efficiently and arrive at a better solution, which is usually, either having their children already, having the majority of their college paid for, or getting more funding from, funding sources for college that allows them, doesn't put as much burden on the family. There's a lot of aspects to this that, are great things to be considering as you're planning this. And I think I've already reached out to the gentleman. I need to check my messages on LinkedIn actually the last couple of days, because I want to get this gentleman on my channel here and interview him, because he's phenomenal talking about the whole college prep thing from, early high school all the way through. How do you set things up so your child has the best opportunity to get into the workforce and into their career, no matter which way it is, but do it with the most efficiency possible? So love to hear any thoughts you've got on the college side.
Yeah, all great points, man. And all reasons why I don't like 529 plans. They don't really make sense to me. Well, once you explore these alternative ways of preparing for college. And, again, the things that Dave teaches, it really teaches you to play it safe. I mean, could a 529 plan work out for you, for college planning? Yeah, maybe, but it's a gamble. And one of the reasons it's a gamble is because typically with a 529 plan, it's usually invested in the market, right? At least a large portion of it anyways. Right. The problem with that is that you don't have enough runway. You don't have enough time to really take advantage of the long-term average rate of return that the market does over, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years, because you have a much smaller time window here. We're talking about, it depends on when you start the plan, but if it's 10 years, even 15 years, it's really not enough time. I mean, you have to get lucky, essentially, that you're going to hit another major bull market like we've had over the last 10 years. If you had a 529 plan over the recent bull market, you probably did fine. But how do you know that's going to happen again? Like, do you know what the stock market's going to do over the next 10 years? I don't think anybody does. So for me, it's just much more of a gamble than people think. Not to mention, well, like you mentioned earlier, Jeff, there's a significant lack of control. There's a lot of limitations, and it just doesn't really make sense to me. The other thing too, though, is that, and this is why I think, in my opinion, just based on the research I've done, that dividend paying cash value whole life insurance is one of, if not the best way to save for college, for a number of different reasons. But there's one in particular that I want to hit on, because actually I overheard a conversation the other day. A gentleman was talking about how him and his wife were sacrificing their financial future right now for their kids' financial future, their education, which is a noble thing to do. And I think we need to, obviously do that for our kids. The problem is you're not aware that you don't have to sacrifice your financial future just so your child can have an education. You can do both once you understand how these things work, right? So you could with a dividend paying whole life insurance policy, you could use that for your child's education. Actually, before I get to that part, we've already discussed how that helps with your retirement, because that's going to get uninterrupted tax-free compound growth for the life of the policy. It's a forced savings vehicle. You have the death benefit. It's solving multiple problems. We have long-term care protection with it as well, right? Acts as a great volatility buffer in retirement for when the market goes down like it currently is. You can create supplemental tax-free retirement income from it as well, taking the dividends in cash, right? It's it gives you permission to spend as well, because you know that the assets you spend in retirement, right, are going to be replenished by the death benefit once you pass away. Okay. So a lot of benefits to where you're preparing for your retirement. When you use whole life insurance for college planning, you don't have to sacrifice any of that, because you can use the whole life policy to pay for your child's, or help pay for your child's education by taking policy loans against it once they're ready. Once they hit when it's time for them to go to college, you can take policy loans against it, help cover tuition or whatever expenses. And I'm a big advocate of this, actually having your child, like setting up some type of loan structure. This teaches fiscal responsibility to your kids, right? Where they're going to slowly pay that policy loan back over time. Okay. Just like they would a regular student loan, right? But throughout that time period, let's say it takes them 10, 20 years, whatever, to pay off the policy loan. Well, guess what? Your money was continuing to grow in the policy the entire time. And every time they make a repayment on that policy loan, that's restoring cash value in your policy. So 20 years goes by, let's say you're reaching retirement age, you've helped put your child through college, and you still have this asset for retirement that could be completely paid off, because you could pay off a whole life policy. You don't have to pay into it your entire life. So you've now helped secure your financial future, while at the same time helping your child's with your child's education. And I just like when I grasped that concept, I was like, why on earth would anybody do anything else? Like it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, I suppose again, everybody's situation is different. Could a 529 plan be a part of it? Sure, but I don't think it should be the only thing. And if you can prepare for your retirement and save for your child's education at the same time, why on earth would we not do that? And also what this does is it reduces the amount of money we have to make in order to achieve all of our goals, because we're solving multiple problems with one financial vehicle, right? It's preparing for college education and it's preparing for retirement. The same dollars. I don't have to put money into a 529 plan and a 401k at the same time. Now I'm going in two different directions here, right? My $500, let's say, now it's 250 here, 250 here, instead of $500 concentrated in one place, which is going to be way more powerful, right? That's the power of efficiency. So I think for me, college planning, huge benefit using cash value life insurance. Like you said, it doesn't interfere with FAFSA, student loans. Sometimes I think 529 plans can interfere with scholarships as well. I've heard stories of that. Can't confirm that 100%, but I've heard stories of that. So, and then you mentioned like, what if your child doesn't want to go to college? What are you going to do with it then, right? You're going to take a hit. Maybe I think you can use it for your own education if you wanted. But if you're saving in a whole life insurance policy, if they don't go to college, well, you just continue funding the policy and use it for your retirement. So it makes sense to me. But yeah, that baby step, again, it's just teaching people how to play it safe. Maybe that's good for some, but it's certainly not the most efficient way to do it.
Yep. Yeah, definitely not thinking outside the box on some of that and really looking at the other pieces, because you did mention it, there are scenarios where people earn too much money and they don't qualify for much financial aid. And that can hinder the whole process. I mean, I think the Matt Love interview with that gentleman, he spoke to that a few times of, it can be a problem that people aren't prepared for. They think, well, I need to make more money to do all these other things. But then when it comes to college planning, making more money actually hinders the process, and it hinders the ability of your child to get into the college maybe that they want to, or, just set them up for a different path, and maybe more on the child, more financial stress, and really getting them into the debt cycle, much more prematurely if they're not able to qualify for those scholarships and the things like you mentioned. So yeah, It's something to really take a closer look at, because it's a very, very important piece that gets overlooked. We don't think there's any other options, much like with retirement. Well, everybody does a 401k. Well, when it comes to college, everybody does a 529, and we just don't think outside that. So these are definitely some good things to consider. As we move along.
What's up, my fellow wealth creator? Thank you so much for checking out this clip from the Millennial Wealth Creator podcast. If you'd like to watch the full podcast, there will be a link down below in the description. Make sure to also check out the additional tools, training, resources that I have in the description as well, just to help you along your journey. Thanks again for checking out the clip, and we'll see you in the next one.